Good morning, everyone. We're just waiting for more people to join. So if you could just bear with us, you're very welcome to this morning's weekly Wednesday webinar. Just so you're aware, I've put you all on mute all. If you wish to switch off your video, you can do that too. So it'll just be better for the presentation without any interference. So just bear with us, please. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's webinar, our Aspira's weekly Wednesday webinar, leveraging Agile in a virtual environment. There'll probably be a little bit of noise as people are joining in. Can you just ensure that everybody has switched off their sound and is on mute? We'll be endeavoring to do that when Tom actually will start the webinar. I'll be switching you all onto mute. So my name is Damien Kearns. I'll be acting as the MC for this webinar, which is titled Leveraging Agile in a Virtual Environment. The webinar, which is hosted by the team here in Aspira, is the fourth of our popular webinar series, which is running weekly on a range of topics. I'm an advisory manager within our consulting department, supporting and managing some of our various client engagements. My colleague, Tom McGrath, who will be your presenter today, is also an advisory manager within our consulting department at Aspira. So for those of you who are not aware about us and what Aspira do, to sum it up, we are a specialist project management consultancy and IT services firm based globally with offices in Dublin, Cork, Abu Dhabi and Amsterdam. So to give you a little bit of a background on what we do, we're based on 6 pillars which offer IT and consultancy services. Those pillars are consulting, whereby we can help you with your overall consultancy, IT and project needs. Training, we specialize in project management, agile and business analysis training. Resourcing, providing you with PMs, business analysts, tech staff, etc. We develop software and we have a full test team as well. We provide IT services and support and also business applications. So just by way of some housekeeping before we get into the webinar, we're going to place everybody on mute, and that means that hopefully there won't be too much interference, as I know that everybody's working in a remote way at the moment. We don't want to silence all communication though. If you do have questions, there is the team chat functionality. And for those of you who are not au fait with chat, it's the chat icon second from the top on the left-hand side of your team screen. As we're going through the webinar and as Tom is talking, if you have questions, please add them into the chat forum. However, There's a lot of participants on this webinar, which is brilliant. However, we may not get to every single question that is within the time allotted, but we will try and follow up directly with anybody involved. So, okay, so housekeeping done, let's talk about the objective of today's webinar, which is to show you how to leverage Agile in a remote environment. So we're all living in a new world, and given the current changes and challenges across the traditional world of work towards remote working, Tom is going to talk about the best way to leverage Agile as an approach and a mindset to allow us to continue being productive and innovative by embracing the best of Agile. Now, I would like you to make sure, guys, if you have, can you please get your phone and have your phone close by? We're going to be using your phone for a little exercise that we're going to go through now. So I'm just going to give you a second to just have your phones ready. And what I would like you to do now, guys, is I want you to go to the website www.menti.com, and I want you to add in the code 462594. So go to www.menti.com using your phone, so you still have your laptop in front of you, and use the code 462594. So what we're going to do is we want to have a little bit of a question and feedback from you guys in relation to Agile. So if we can go to our first question, please. And our first question is, how agile would you consider your organization? Now, there's a lot of surveys being done on this, and even in the more recent one showed that 46% of organizations that were surveyed have used an agile or a hybrid approach. And it'd be interesting to see what your response is, and that's quite interesting. Okay, very interesting. Okay, so in relation to the next question, please, how would you rate your exposure to or your experience of working in an agile environment? So from 600 development and IT professional companies, they said they were 16% pure agile. However, 51% of those are trying to lean towards being more agile. Okay, so there's a good base of people who are familiar but want to know more. That's interesting. So if we were to look at the next question, which is in relation to challenges. So what do you feel are the typical challenges associated with trying to be agile in a virtual environment? Which would you consider to be the highest priority? We found from dealing with clients that some of the roadblocks that they would have would be trying to implement agile. There's too many projects per team. There's a lack of company vision, lack of cohesion, unclear project scope. Building trust, very interesting. Culture and rapport with team members. That's good. Okay, because this will be a kind of a driver on this webinar about the mindset and culture. Okay, and then if we move on to the next question, please. How important is Agile to you in your professional environment on a scale of not at all to extremely important? From a survey done by Forbes of 500 senior executives recently, they found that 92% felt that they believed organizational agility is critical to business successes, which is what Agile is. Somewhat extremely. Okay. Okay. Really useful feedback, and thanks for answering those questions for us. And now what I would like to do is I'd like to hand over to Tom, who will take us through this presentation. And again, as you're working through the presentation, please use the chat forum to add any questions. So over to you, Tom, and thank you and good luck.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Just making sure I'm properly set up here before I start talking. So I think I'll start by saying some of the interesting takeaways from your responses there is that quite a lot of you are working in agile organizations, but at the same time, there seems to be quite a high percentage of the audience here that feel the need for more upskilling in agile. So hopefully we'll set you on the path to identifying your options and how you might best use agile in your workplace depending on your own situation and your own projects, etc. So delighted to be speaking to you this morning in the fourth webinar in our weekly series, which is titled Leveraging Agile in a Virtual Environment. I'd also like to extend a good afternoon to the attendees joining us from Holland and further east perhaps. So given our new reality and collective move towards remote working, we will look at how an agile approach can allow us to continue being productive and innovative. I work within our consulting advisory team, as mentioned by Damien, and I'm speaking to you today from my home here in Donaghcarney in East Meath. So like many of you, I'm sure I've adopted an agile mindset to working from home with both my Aspira colleagues and clients via our virtual channels. And my wife and kids have also shown great agility in adapting to my permanent presence here at home as well. So let's have a look at today's agenda to get started. So to start with, we'll discuss what it means to be agile in a virtual environment and how you might go about adapting your team if you're presently co-located, for example, or maybe you're building your team from scratch to your new virtual environment. I am conscious that there's probably a broad range of experience and levels of exposure to agile amongst you all, so I've endeavored to tailor this presentation to what I hope will appeal to each of you. For those of you who might be completely new to agile, we'll start by addressing some key aspects of agile in this section. Given that there will no doubt be some challenges in adapting yourself and your team to this new environment in a lot of cases, we'll consider some of the more common challenges and potential suggestions which will help minimize or remove those impacts. We'll also look at how leaders best support and manage within this virtual environment, and we'll then consider some of the applications for you to potentially leverage while working remotely, such that you can do so in an efficient manner for the betterment of yourself and your team. We'll wrap up then with any questions, and whilst doing so, we'll also ask you to please complete a brief survey form that we've created. We'll endeavour, as Damien mentioned, to address any of your queries following the presentation. And again, you can use the chat form as well, as Damien has mentioned, during the presentation. So your participation is really much encouraged because it's that feedback and participation that allows us to enhance our webinars going forward. So let's start with what it means to be agile in this virtual environment. Agile or agility is more than just another term to add to our list of favourite or maybe even most hated buzzwords. The Collins English Dictionary defines agile as nimble, quick in movement, or mentally acute. But the term that comes to mind for me personally when I'm thinking of agile is flexibility. And I'm physically demonstrating that for you here in this image, I wish. So our webinar is titled Leveraging Agile in a Virtual Environment, and we'll focus on the leveraging agile element of that title, just to set the context for today. So I suppose we've all been hearing more about agile, but it can be talked about in various different ways, and depending on the situation, it can mean very different things to different people. So over the last few years, I've consistently heard and seen references to the terms Agile and Scrum, most notably in a technology and project management context. However, more recently, this has found its way into mainstream working environments, and I've noticed more and more people talking about Agile in conversations, in emails, and on social media. But what does Agile mean, and why has this become so prominent? The benefits of adopting an Agile methodology don't just begin with and end with your software development team. In fact, leveraging agile work methods or an agile mindset have valuable applications in other departments within your organizations, namely marketing, development, finance, legal, maybe even HR. The fundamentals of agile principles, which are trust, teamwork, collaboration, open and direct communication, and efficiency, they're all critical components of a well-run team, regardless of the role the team serves. And it is this agile mindset that our webinar today mainly focuses upon. So, as promised, we'll start with a bit of background for those of you maybe not as familiar with Agile. The Agile method is an approach to project management that is designed to help development teams effectively address the moving targets and uncertainties that characterize the creation of new software applications. And we'll refer to the Agile Scrum Framework predominantly during this webinar when referring to Agile as a methodology. One of the hallmarks of Agile is that it uses incremental, iterative sequences of work that are commonly referred to as sprints. A sprint is simply the time allotted for a specific phase of a project, and it's considered then to be complete when that time period or the phase has expired. The next phase begins and runs through its designated time frame and so on until all of the phases of the project are complete. Some of the other terms associated with the Scrum framework include the likes of sprint, release, Scrum Master, development team, backlog, burn down chart, etc. So I've just put up some definitions here as listed just for your reference for those of you maybe not as familiar with some of this terminology. And they'll remain on screen here for about another minute or so if you just want to take note of any in particular. It's also useful for us to refer to the waterfall approach when discussing Agile. Waterfall, as many of you know, is a more structured development methodology. So most times it can be quite rigid, whereas Agile is quite a flexible method, which allows changes to be made in the project development requirements, even if the initial planning has been completed. Taking an Agile approach will not be appropriate in every situation, however, as you might appreciate. There will be times when a more traditional waterfall approach will work better. The key for you is to determine what process to use based on the individual situation, based on the team, based on the objective, or maybe the stakeholders involved. Some might argue that Agile can and should be used all of the time, but as with anything, you really do need to strike a balance. Agile also supports a range of development models, such as Scrum and Kanban, which are just some of the frameworks that help teams adhere to the Agile principles to get stuff done. There is a general misconception that the Agile method and Scrum are the same thing. So it's important to emphasize that Scrum is actually a way of doing work within Agile and arguably the most widely used. So as my good colleague Jim, who runs our professional Scrum Master course, eloquently put it, it's really Scrum is where the rubber hits the road within the Agile world as a potential framework under Agile. So the Kanban method is a way to design, manage, and enhance the workflow of a development project, enabling organizations to begin with their existing workflow and make gradual improvements by visualizing the workflow, limiting the work in progress, and focusing on the work completed. There are other methods as depicted here under the image, which is the image of the umbrella of Agile, but we won't delve into those other frameworks today. So many of the ideas behind Agile emerged in the 1970s as alternatives to traditional approaches to project development. But the term Agile in the context of software development was first popularized by the Manifesto for Agile Software Development, which was created in 2001 by a group of experienced software developers who came to realize that they were practicing software development in a different manner from the classic waterfall methodology. The Agile Manifesto documented their shared beliefs about how modern software development processes should operate, and the values as outlined in the manifesto were derived. So these are individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working product over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. Whilst the items on the right still have their place and value, the Agile approach values the items on the left much more so. In addition to these 4 values, there are also 12 detailed principles that those investing in Agile endeavour to follow, which we'll touch upon at various points throughout the presentation this morning. But as you can see, these principles align with the values, processes, and practices that I've already mentioned. So, Agile can be summarized using the following 4 categories. Agile is firstly a mindset, which really is the context of today's webinar. It is described by the 4 values as noted. It is defined by the 12 principles, and it then manifests itself through the various processes and practices as outlined. So hopefully this gives you a good feel for the general concept of Agile and the context within which we're talking about this morning. An Agile mindset is about creating and responding to change in uncertain and turbulent environments, like that of COVID-19. It's about thinking through how you can understand what's going on in the environment, identify what uncertainty you're facing, and figure out how to adapt as you go along. Developing an agile mindset is essential, but once you've mastered how quickly to tie this to the values and principles outlined above, you're well on the road. But the next stage is to put agile working into practice, which is what we'll talk about next. So, when thinking about how to be or remain remotely agile through COVID-19, we should consider that one of the pillars of agile ways of working is team co-location. One of the Agile Manifesto principles states that the most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a team is face-to-face conversation. Studies show that teams that work together in the same place report higher productivity and effectiveness and better decision making. So that's probably fairly obvious. So what happens when a disruption such as COVID renders co-location inadvisable or impossible? Can team members working in remote locations still be agile? So the answer in my mind is most definitely yes. Whilst face-to-face conversation is the most efficient and effective, it's not the only option, and quite often our remote options are the best ones. Most teams, especially those that have been formed recently, will experience some drop in productivity perhaps, but this should not be considered a huge cause for concern. Some form of chaos can be typical in the early stages of an agile approach, and it's also further evidence that co-location really does make a difference. But we're also finding that agile makes remote working much easier. Many companies that are working in an agile way say some agile principles in particular help them to become more effective remotely through the following, for example. Rigid prioritization, where creating backlogs and constantly refining them have made sure that individuals and teams can work on the most valuable things, even when they're working remotely. A regular rhythm of meetings help to make sure that everyone is aligned and enables collaboration when people are working from home. Working in small, cross-functional, autonomous teams, small teams will build resiliency and make it easier to change direction as and when needed. And agile leadership. This encourages good leaders to focus on firm outputs and goals, allowing teams to have a common vision to work towards. I know from some of my own colleagues that the new virtual way of working certainly puts far greater emphasis on productivity and output, and I know that myself. And that's why it's a natural outcome for so many people working from home, regardless of your work or your approach to your own work or your projects. So, by embracing the agile values, remote agile should not be an intimidating prospect. But a lot of common techniques of agile can be copied from the physical to the virtual environment. So agile in a virtual environment can be harder to create and maintain. There is a distinction between new and mature teams adopting to a virtual environment. A virtual environment can let mature agile teams thrive. It can also make less mature, less self-aware teams struggle. So look, I think what this is saying is the challenges are very real, but by overcoming them, remote agile can be more powerful than even a physical co-located setup. So you should consider what is good about being co-located. What advantages and opportunities do you have in such a setup? And then think about your remote team in that context. How can you achieve the same results in the virtual environment relative to the co-located environment? What solutions and tools would you need to emulate these opportunities? So maybe set aside some time for reality checks of communication and transparency, especially at the beginning of your team's journey. In a virtual environment, it's easier to miss some red flags. Experiment with translating exercises and activities to a virtual environment. It's often possible. Think about how the technique uses elements of the physical environment and how you can achieve it in the virtual environment. At its core, Agile is a set of cultural values, principles, and behaviors, rather than a set of specific practices. So going back to what we covered at the start of the presentation. Teams that remain true to the principles can still operate effectively until life and business return to more normal patterns. Here's how teams should focus their efforts in order to be agile. Maintaining alignment. The ability to act autonomously spurs ownership and creativity, enabling teams to make quick decisions and to move fast, which is critical in today's environment. But a high degree of autonomy works only when there's also a high degree of alignment in and amongst teams. And the importance of this alignment is heightened when team members are working remotely. Agile leaders really need to make doubly sure that teams align around the company's overall purpose, strategy, and priorities. So leaders really need to communicate intent, explain both the why and the what, so that members stay focused on their team's goals and the connection to larger business objectives. In normal times, this alignment is the precursor to autonomy, but in times of distraction, such as now, when teams are physically separated, alignment becomes much more important than ever. Prioritize your ceremonies. Regular ceremonies help bring structure and normalcy to the remote workday. So a common cadence of virtual meetings and calls includes weekly team touch points to discuss progress, forecast plans for the coming week, go through official communications from management, and to raise any emerging risks or issues. Daily stand-ups are used to review progress since yesterday, plan for today, and raise any issues or blockers. In addition, virtual meetings and instant messaging are used as needed to chat with colleagues about work and other issues. So it also helps greatly for leaders to be transparent about their own calendars and their own commitments with the rest of their teams. Use virtual tools. This should be somewhat easy, given that there are plenty of virtual tools available today, and they can help. Consider using conferencing tools for audio and video, such as MS Teams, which we're using today, or maybe Zoom, which is probably more broadly popular in social terms. Larger companies can use their own virtual private networks. An always-on connection during working hours can facilitate informal and formal connections amongst team members. Frequent calls or conference calls during the early days of remote working can help people adapt to a new way of interacting. Another good thing to use is a breakout capability. So this is the ability for team members to engage in one-to-one meetings while also remaining part of a larger virtual gathering. So it's an important component of simulating co-location. And virtual whiteboards are another useful tool for overcoming physical separation. And then finally, frequent calls or video conferences, as mentioned. During the early days, in particular of remote working, this is really, really important and can help people adapt. In planning how to work remotely, it can help break down the activities that typically occur during a day and think about where in the physical office they take place, such that you can replicate those activities in the virtual environment. So now let's look at just some of the challenges that you might face with Agile in this virtual environment. Building a structure to mitigate the challenge of chaos. So we have all no doubt experienced some level of chaos that can manifest itself in projects, regardless of how you're running the project, whether it's Waterfall or Agile or any adaptive model. It's a very real challenge and one that you're more likely to encounter when adapting to the virtual environment that we now find ourselves in. So given that, it really is important that we're thinking about the Agile mindset to meet those challenges. And one such way of doing that is building a flexible structure. So a good example of such a flexible structure is the Scrum Framework that I mentioned at the start. That lays out some must-haves and leaves you space to fill it with content suitable for your product. Write down this meta information on your product with your team. Naming team rules and flow explicitly is key for Agile approaches, like the Kanban principle, wherein you get to visualize the workflow. The following topics to support a flexible structure are usually worth level setting with your team, and these include meeting frequencies. When will meetings take place? Who needs to be there? What's the goal? Etc. Visualize your task workflow. MS Planner, Jira Workflow, or Azure Devops are just some of the examples that you can use. What can I expect from you? So, especially useful in bigger teams. Capture the roles in the team and what they can expect from one another. This is meant to be a group exercise, so the process of forging shared expectations is much more important in this exercise than the actual outcome of a written agreement or a written document. And use widely known Agile techniques for describing the flow. Write down your date of delivery, your date of release, your team contract, or your release plan. And I suppose, given the amount of time that COVID is getting in the news these days, I was struck with the recent advice from the WHO's Dr. Ryan when advising the world about how to tackle the challenge of COVID-19. And I think for a lot of us, what really struck home in the early days was his advice around the need for speed over perfection. And that could be considered sound advice in terms of setting up a flexible structure in an Agile environment. So I think what I read from that and how I apply it here is that don't try to find the perfect solution. Describe the processes that you're already using in place, find the best of what you're using, adapt them and improve them. And then build repeatable good habits. So the habit of looking at your sprint burn down chart at stand-ups, or the habit of starting the day on a shared dashboard. So one of the other challenges and one of the more intangible challenges is building a virtual team culture and trust. And this really needs to be achieved if the goal of remaining or becoming agile in the virtual environment is to be achieved. So if we start with culture, good leaders will look for inventive ways to build a sense of culture for their team members. This may be the most difficult part of working remotely and the most important. So as I said, culture is an intangible but critical aspect of the workplace, and it is easily lost when teams physically disperse. So one way might be invite your team members into your new work environment, share your photos, give a virtual tour of your home office, introduce them to your family members, etc. Another method is to assign roles to the team to enable focus and to encourage engagement. So for example, you might assign somebody the rabbit hole master, and they're there to ensure that you don't get stuck in any unnecessary discussions. A Zen master might help keep the energy levels at their optimum, and the timekeeper can manage the agenda and the time slots. So all of these things will point back to the flexible structure we spoke about earlier. Adhering to 3 good practices will also help create a functioning culture while you're working in a virtual environment. The first of these is empathy. Some people will respond more readily than others to the total disruption of their work environment. Those with children may have more challenges working from home than those without, for example. Consider that everyone's take on this situation will be different, and don't be afraid to talk about those various perspectives openly. Team members that remain aware of one another's circumstances can operate effectively until life and business return to more normal terms. Transparency. During times of uncertainty, leaders should make an extra effort to be totally transparent about their work, their ongoing deadlines, and their personal responses. And engagement. Encourage conversation amongst colleagues. Not every conversation has to be about work. So while no one knows how long COVID-19 will last, it does seem inevitable that many of us will be working remotely for at least weeks, if not months. God help us. Productivity may take a hit, but it doesn't have to hurt. An agile approach can keep remote teams functioning effectively and make them more resilient for the future. Building trust may be difficult, but when the focus on promoting self-reliance and maintaining transparency is there, you have all the foundations you need. Building trust is crucial for effective collaboration. Both inside the technical team and between the technical team and the client is also crucial, along with transparency between development and the business to make sure we are building the right thing. And we need openness inside the team to make sure that we're building it the right way. So all of those things together are so important. So is feedback communicated directly, not necessarily through your manager? Do you have regular sprint retrospectives? How does the team behave there? Is there healthy debates? Is it action driven? Is support being offered? Are you load balancing? Is the mood good, etc.? All the things you look for in a co-located environment. And are impediments communicated immediately to the rest of the team and to the product owner? So agree with the team to always assume good intentions. If needed, remind each other about it. Agree on the ground rules for cooperation. Some of these might include how can team members grab each other's attention during the work time for urgent issues? At Aspira, for example, we use team chat for that. Or pick up the phone. Do you want to specify some focus time during which you won't react to non-urgent, unimportant communications? And agree the forms for different kinds of communication amongst your team. Let's briefly look now at the leader's role in this environment. And most of this we've already touched on. So as mentioned, when considering the challenges, every new team needs to find their own flexible structure to avoid or at least minimize the impact of the potential chaos that awaits. The first task when starting a new project is to help with the first basic structure, along with a focus on building the trust and culture, ensuring that the formation of a real team around a common goal, both of which we've spoken about. Then comes the leader's support for self-reliance, both as individuals and as a team, and to make sure they build their own self-regulation mechanisms. It's during this process that the team starts to take ownership. Step by step, the team will create their new rules, they'll influence each other's behavior, and they will learn from each other. The leader's job as a project manager or as a scrum master, for example, is to be with them and to help them with their transition and adapting to the changes and challenges they encounter. So this really is where the servant leader ideal stems from, essentially, as well. So again, the servant leader concept is something that's fundamental to the Agile approach. Next, we'll look at some of the applications to be leveraged. But first, I'd like to play you this short video. And this just is a light-hearted demonstration of some of the challenges, both technical and physical, that I'm sure we've all encountered in our virtual working worlds.
Never mind, I got it. I just had to change a few settings.
Great. Maybe we can get started then. Oh, great.
I think your mic is picking up your speakers.
My mic?
Do you have headphones?
You want me to put them on?
No, I want you to smell them. No, I want you to put them on. Hey, Beth.
Hey everyone, sorry I'm late. I had to download a new version of the platform.
You should plan extra time for the updates. There's pretty much one every time.
Sounds like someone just joined.
Hey guys, it's John. I had to call in. I'm stuck in traffic. Have I missed anything yet?
No, it would have been nice for you to join the rest of us, but we'll see you when you get home. All right, while everyone is here, finally, Tyler, do you have that financial report?
Well, it's been the last few weeks updating our books, and I got some great news for you. Schedule from this point last year. We had a great Q1.
We lost Tyler, I think.
Am I frozen?
Hey, Trip, I think we lost Tyler.
Yeah, I know, we lost Tyler.
Hey guys, it sounded like Tyler was cutting out.
We know, John. All right, while we wait on Tyler, why don't we go over all of the reports from Beth, are you with us?
Oh yeah.
Okay, everyone, I know some of you have to leave soon, but I just wanted to go over a couple of the queries before. Okay, excuse me. My wife's out of town this week. I'm so sorry. Okay, you just spilt grape juice on the carpet. Daddy is in a meeting. Tyler, can you go over the numbers one more time, please?
I thought Beth had an adjustment. Hey, Beth.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys, that's my iTunes.
Hey guys, hang on. I'm gonna join in. Hey, what platform are you guys on? Skype? FaceTime?
It's in the invite.
Oh, never mind. I see it. It's right there in the invite.
Okay, now I can see everybody. Let's reschedule and let's just do a regular old conference call, okay? Paul, can you have David send out the 9-digit passcode?
I heard you.
Yeah, he's been here the whole time.
All right, everybody. I'll see you later.
Okay, so just a little lighthearted take on some of the challenges with working and communicating in the virtual environment. Hope you enjoyed that. And now you all know what Damien looks like as well. So finally, let me briefly introduce you to some of the applications and technologies available to support us in our Agile working endeavors whilst working remotely. Microsoft have a series of tools that are useful for work management, from simple task lists and visual Kanban boards with cards. These tools can offer a range of applications that can be used by project team members, portfolio managers, project managers, product owners, and Agile teams in general. Given our topic of discussion today, we'll focus our demonstration on some of the more useful features of Azure Devops in particular. So we're not touching on some of the other popular Agile tools like Jira from Atlassian, but most of today's tools are common from a Scrum development perspective. And at Aspira, we leverage both Azure Devops and Jira. However, I will also very quickly talk about some of the other tools that might help you improve your collaboration on projects. Microsoft Planner is a simplified way to manage and organize your tasks and projects along with To-Do, which is ideal for keeping organized. And as you can see in the screen displayed, it's also possible to integrate Planner tasks with To-Do. Azure Devops, also known as Azure Boards, was originally designed for developers to manage their tasks, projects, and to push out code. But over time, this product has become Microsoft's Agile project solution. With the ability to integrate with roadmaps for Project for the Web, you can start to get the full picture of all of your projects across the entire portfolio, both Waterfall and Agile alike. And we have a short demo available for you on this particular tool, given its specific Agile alignment. Project for the Web works with teams to support collaboration and to make it easy to manage all aspects of a project, including file sharing, chats, meetings, and more specific to our Agile discussion today, this tool has the capability to visualize your project in a timeline or Kanban view. With Teams, you can quickly add new members and set up tasks, and then easily switch between grids, boards, or Gantt charts to track progress. And because Project is part of Microsoft 365, project teams can save time and do more with built-in connections to familiar apps like Microsoft Teams and Office. The last one worth mentioning is the new project for the web, which provides greater visibility into your projects and powerful tools to help you anticipate future needs. You can create really visual and content-rich interactive dashboards in Power BI, so you can visualize every aspect of each project at a glance. And this mirrors what many typical Agile status dashboards look like. So let's have a very quick look now at the Azure Devops in terms of some of its capabilities, just to give you a little bit of a flavor.
Started with Azure Boards, go to dev.azure.com where you can sign up for Azure DevOps for free. First, you'll have to log in with a Microsoft identity. Then choose a project name that you remember. I'll call my project the best app ever and leave it as private, so only people who I add can see it. Once your project is created, go to the Boards section of Azure DevOps and you can get started adding work. To add a new item, simply click this plus button and type a title onto the card. You'll see that it's been added to your new column. After creating some more work items, you can move them between columns to visualize the various states that make sense for your project. You can also customize these columns and what shows on the cards so they make sense for your team. I'm going to switch to a project here that I already have set up with some work on it so you can see some of those customizations. You'll see here that I have work items in various states in this Fabricam Fiber Web project. We have the name of the work item, who it's assigned to, and its tags showing up on these cards. And you can update some of those fields from right here. You may have also noticed that some of these cards are highlighted. I've set up some styles on this board so that work jumps out when it needs a higher level of visibility. For example, I have a style set up to highlight cards red when they have the blocked tag to help get that work unblocked as soon as possible. This is the same view we just looked at, so you can still move any of these cards between columns to visualize the progress of your work. You can also add a series of tasks and have them show up on a card for lightweight tracking to support work elements of a story. Each of these cards can also be opened up for more details so that you can add as much information as you need. You can use this work item to hold formatted details, images, and links to other work items in the project, whatever you need to refine the work item. You can also customize the fields on your work items to meet your team's tracking needs. Each of these boards also has a backlog associated with it, where you can really get into the nitty-gritty of prioritizing all the work that you have. Reordering on your backlog is as easy as drag and drop. You can also add a new work item here. And then move it around as necessary. There's also a view above this user stories backlog features, which lets you get a higher level view of the work being done and ensure that you have good cross-team objectives. Each of these features can be expanded so you can see what related user stories are happening under it. So now you have all these user stories for awesome features that you're going to build. What about scheduling the actual tasks that need to get done? We're going to head over to the sprints view for that. For each of the user stories that you defined, this is an iteration view where you can create tasks for each story and visualize the progress being made on them in the current sprint. If something just isn't going to make it in this sprint, you can drag it over to a different sprint in the planning pane on the right. Like your other boards, each sprint also has a backlog view where you can easily see a story split into its tasks that have been scheduled into the sprint. You can also prioritize those tasks and stories and schedule tasks into other sprints as necessary. Finally, you can track work going on using queries. I'm going to create a query that will grab all of the active bugs under the current iteration. I have it set up here so that the work item type is a bug and that the iteration is the current one. I can create as many of these queries as I want and easily share the results with my team. One of the ways I can share the results is by creating a chart which visualizes the work. I'm going to set up a chart here which shows a count of who these bugs are assigned to, so that I can take a look at how many bugs each engineer has to fix before the end of the sprint. I can also take these charts and pin them to my team's dashboard. Over here on my dashboard, I have a tailored view for my team, where I can share information and monitor progress to help inform workflow improvements.
So a useful little demo on the capabilities of one particular tool for managing Agile in a virtual environment via Azure Devops. So before we finish, we'd just like to draw your attention to some potential supports that might interest your organizations. The COVID-19 pandemic has created severe challenges for businesses, with significant job losses, worldwide disruption, and an uncertain road ahead. As such, we at Aspira have adapted to the new normal, and we are now delivering our courses virtually. So prior to any course, individual contact will be made with all participants to find out their learning preferences, their training objectives, their project experience, etc. So essentially, we will tailor our offerings depending on your needs. Our relevant Agile and Scrum training offerings include these particular courses as listed, with the upcoming course dates as shown. So look, you can avail of significant discounts if inquiring by using today's webinar code displayed. In this space, we can also offer some of our bespoke Agile services. If as an organization you're interested in considering your options for either improving existing Agile practices or maybe starting down the road of Agile transformation using our adaptive methodology and approach, then you might consider getting in touch. Finally, for any of you supported as companies by Enterprise Ireland, they are currently responding to the current crisis by working with Irish companies to help them avail of business response supports as recently unveiled by the government. So these supports are designed to help businesses stabilise and adapt to the evolving situation in preparation for getting back on the road to recovery. So for further information on those, you can either contact Aspira regarding our offering as an advisor or contact Enterprise Ireland directly. So in summary, being agile in a virtual environment is definitely possible, but it can be challenging for the reasons that I've outlined. You will have to focus both on the challenges of building the team for the virtual environment and the challenge of organising remote work. At Aspira, we leverage both our experience in both of those areas, but if you do wish to experiment with Agile in your own virtual environment, just remember the following few takeaways. Identify your values. You need to understand your values first to make sure that you share them with the whole team. The Scrum values are a good starting point for remote teams: courage, focus, commitment, openness, and respect. Meet with your teams daily. Make sure to cover not only the technical topics. You want the team to work out their values in practice, so just give them the space to be able to do that. Look out for communication gaps and conflicts. It's easier to avoid unpleasant topics in a remote world, and it is harder to give impromptu feedback. And in the end, just remember to leave the team with the space to learn from both their successes and their failures. Step by step, they should be able to handle more chaos themselves and become less dependent on your support. Adapting Agile to a virtual environment is the next big step for the Agile world. But while Scrum is already running with remote development teams, it is still in its infancy. But we are here at Aspira to assist in that journey if needs be. So that's the end of the presentation. As Damien mentioned at the start, if you have any questions or comments, please raise them on the chat. In parallel, again, please complete our short online survey if you don't mind. You can access the feedback form by opening the camera app on your phone now and pointing it at the QR code, which is displayed here. But if for any reason that doesn't work, then please see the URL link which Damien has posted on the chat forum. So thanks very much for listening, folks. Hopefully the connection was good. Hopefully you're able to hear me okay. And I'll hand it back to Damien.
So thanks very much, Tom. That was a really interesting webinar. And again, thank you for sharing that video of me working from home. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Quick question that I have here, if you can answer it, is that a lot of people would just assume that Agile is only for IT software delivery projects. Is it for other projects as well?
Well, I suppose ever since the release of the Manifesto, Agile methodologies have not only contributed to IT project management, but they've also permeated into non-IT or non-software projects. So the truth really is that Agile methodologies really do come from outside the IT or software development industry entirely. So it certainly can be used in non-IT projects, and I myself have leveraged Agile principles and approaches in marketing and HR projects that I've been involved in previously.
Okay, I have another question here from Greg. To what extent have you seen Agile used for infrastructure delivery projects?
Again, very prominent, and it's something that our own software development team have used. Some of our own software development team are actually Scrum Framework proponents, and one of our team, Jim, is actually the head of our training on the Scrum side of the house as well. So those guys would definitely use Agile approach and leverage the best of Agile for infrastructure projects, and have done so on behalf of some of the clients that we have at Aspira.
Another question there, just in relation to the proponents of the waterfall, the sequential step-by-step approach, and Agile. And I know some people are evangelistic about both, but what would you feel are the benefits of Agile over waterfall?
It's the customer focus, it's the open communication, it's the welcoming of change. So I suppose the waterfall approach is much more rigid when it comes to the potential impacts of change once requirements are defined on the early stages of a project. So where Agile really adds benefit is that it actively encourages and welcomes change, because the focus really is at the highest level about customer satisfaction and providing the customer with exactly what it is that they need in a changing market and in a changing environment. So it's a great example now in this time of where market changes and business needs will be under constant flux and change. So as such, projects and approaches will have to change to meet the customer needs in that environment.
Thanks very much, Tom. I think this recording. Oh, we've another question here from Erwin. He's just basically saying the benefit of Agile is also about working with teams and giving them responsibility and respect, which is a key phrase.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
All of these webinar series are recorded. They're all going to be on our website. The recording for this one will be up on our website later this afternoon. I'm just going to post the link there, and we will be running phase 2. This is phase 1 of our webinar series. So phase 2 is coming shortly. So we will be in contact. Again, your feedback is really important because it actually guides and directs the webinar series and content. So all feedback is very welcome. So please take the time to fill out the evaluation form afterwards. There's no other questions there currently at the moment. I'd like to thank Tom and everybody for being part of this presentation, and have a good day, stay safe, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Thank you and goodbye.